have apologized to the pro-democracy groups in Sudan for shooting at the peaceful protesters at the Khartoum massacre. Oh, we are sorry we did it. The devil misled us. It was the military rulers that misled us. We are really on your side. Normally, to shoot at protesters, I don't do it. But they were the ones that pushed us. So suddenly now, because they've fallen out with the military government and each side is looking for allies, suddenly they are courting the pro-democracy groups. So it'll be interesting to see if that leads to one. I wouldn't be surprised to hear promises on one side or the other that, look, support us, and as soon as we deal with these other guys, we're going to push for elections. Trust us. I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised, he says. Now, the RSF has been funding itself by controlling gold mines, a lot like the so-called bandits in northwest Nigeria. Also, the RSF was created out of the Janjaweed militias. The Janjaweed have been compared to the so-called, herdsmen militias. What are the similarities and differences there, Chief?
Yeah, it's that same set of political military variables that you see across the Sahel and stretching eastward towards the Horn of Africa. The same mixture of a bit of anarchy, a bit of lack of state control, right? Lack of monopoly of violence by the state, made worse by weaponized religion being weaponized as a tool for politics and military action, compounded even further by ethnic differences, compounded even further by disputes over farming resources, because the Janjaweed were basically they were supporting the ethnic Arabs in the Darfur region, who were fighting against the ethnic non-Arabs, and they were fighting them. What were they critically fighting them for at first was over farmland. Eventually, it led to a situation where the non-Arabs were also fighting for more autonomy, or maybe even independence from Sudan. But for the Arab population of Darfur, what they were worried about was loss of access to this farmland that was historically, under the ethnic non-Arabs. And so you had this militia who also supporting them as heads people, pushing and fighting that settler population, that farmer population. And so it's a similar dynamic you see in lots of places in North Africa and down into the Sahel where northern Nigeria falls in. It's also the same situation where you see resources being grabbed by these paramilitary groups because the governments, the states, don't really have the military muscle to guarantee territory and to enforce a monopoly of violence. And that leads to a sort of warlordism that picks up. So it's all the same kind of complex. But I think what's different is in a place like Nigeria, it's not as widespread across the whole country. And you also have a lot of political backlash and a resolve in some parts of the country to say, nope, this has to be checked, this doesn't go any further. And you don't really have that same attitude in some of these other countries, like to an extent, Chad, in Somalia, in Sudan, in Libya.
How could this conflict affect neighboring states? So you have Chad, who is our neighbor. They're also Sudan's neighbor. We saw how the Libya conflict worsened our own issues here. So is there a risk of the same thing happening with this Sudan conflict?
Well, we're already seeing neighboring countries being dragged into this. Some allegedly already involved willingly, while denying that they're involved. So, for example, the RSF is accusing Egypt of fighting it on behalf of the Sudanese government, and the Egyptians are saying no, be real. And the Sudanese government is accusing Ethiopia of and the UAE of supporting the RSF. We also had people accusing Wagner or the Russian PMC of supporting the RSF. So far, everybody is denying involvement, but it wouldn't be the first time that foreign governments get involved in another country's problem and say, oh no, we're not involved. You mentioned Chad. Chad has closed their borders, or at least they're tightening their borders with Sudan. There's a big concern among the Chadians that they already have their problems, and that this could, they don't want the spillover into Chad. But I think Sudan is a bit removed from us, and we're already seeing the other players in the region galvanizing around trying to find a peaceful solution. Kenya is piping up, and a few others. So hopefully we can see some sort of containment. I didn't say peaceful settlement or anything like that, but let's see some containment before this becomes other countries' problem.
Lagos, join the conversation. 0700-993-993-993. 0700-993-993-993. 01465-7190. That's our number for women. 01465-7190. Still to come, we'll take you to the UK, where the Deputy Prime Minister has resigned. I will tell you why he resigned. They've already named a new deputy prime minister. This is happening today. This has happened today. We already know who the new deputy prime minister in the UK is. So that story is still coming up right here on today's Big Three Global Edition. Every Friday, we take a break from Nigerian stories and we take a look at what's happening in other parts of the world. And Sudan is in trouble
Sandra.
again. Hi, good evening. What's your name, sir?
Yes, my name is George Onoha.
George, talk to me.
I would like to commend you on your program.
Thank you.
I think the issue in Sudan is probably divine.
It's divine.
How do I mean?
Okay.
How do I mean? The Sudanese operate Southern Sudan. They oppress them. Give all manners of wickedness against them.
Okay.
And then now, they are now fighting themselves. It's just typical of the Arab nation and their way of doing things, So it is God really working against them, turning themselves, against themselves. That is the way I see it. It's unfortunate that we have this colossal loss of life. But then, I hope they should learn their lesson from that. Thank you.
All right, George. Thank you very much for calling. Chief, you were shaking your head while George was speaking there. You disagree with George that this is a divine punishment, divine consequence?
Well, I think, especially today being Eid, we should all be more circumspect in how we make religious and moral judgments over other people's misfortune. But I will just point out that, right now you have in parts of Nigeria, Christian parts of Nigeria, people being killed for not sitting at home. In Christian countries, you have Russia overrunning Ukraine right now. So let's not make something that is just an intrinsic part of human nature, which is brutality, the will to dominate, and the will to use violence to achieve our goals. Let's not turn that into a religious thing, and let's not ascribe to God what is simply human wickedness.
Okay. Let me take a look at messages we've got on WhatsApp. WhatsApp is 080-959-75805. Coco Yewede from Jakande Lekki says, Sudan fight will definitely affect other nations in Africa because directly or indirectly, other African nations are linked with Sudan for business or other purposes. All right. Adegboyega Adedeji says, it's a fact that Sudan crisis will affect other neighboring countries. It shouldn't surprise you that many Nigerians up north go to Sudan to enhance their knowledge of Islam and Islamic studies. I will not be surprised if Nigerians that are stranded in Sudan are majorly people from up north. And speaking of Nigerians stranded in Sudan, the Nigerian government has said that they are currently making plans to evacuate the Nigerians who are stuck there in the middle of this heat. So you have Nigerian students as well. You have, just regular Nigerians who live there as well. 2 days ago, Nigerian students who were there were complaining that the Nigerian embassy in Sudan was neglecting them at this time. And this was at the time where we were hearing that over 200 civilians had already been killed in Khartoum. We heard from Umar Farouk. He spoke on Voice of America. He's a Nigerian student trapped in Sudan. And he said that unlike our counterparts like Niger, Cameroon, Kenya, the citizens of these countries were regularly getting updated about what was going on from their respective embassies in Sudan. The Nigerian embassy wasn't stepping up to its responsibility there. However, I should mention that the young man who spoke to Voice of America said that all the Nigerian students were safe because there's a university close to a military facility where some of the combat soldiers entered, and nothing happened, nothing untoward happened to the Nigerian students who were in that university. Is this normal that something this big can be happening, and we're not hearing a lot of talk from the Nigerian embassy about the Nigerians who are stuck within the conflict-ridden country, Chief?
Is it normal for what an embassy should be doing? No. Is it normal in terms of what we've come to expect from Nigerian embassies? Unfortunately, yes. Oftentimes you find that our embassies, and this is something that's been a regular complaint. I think, let me start with a counter example. I think we saw some great action from the foreign ministry, for example, when it came to the issues in Ukraine and evacuating of our citizens in the Ukraine. However, in other issues, sometimes we've seen it, whether it was issues in South Africa, issues in other places like that, there is often a tendency for the embassy to be less than communicating about what's happening to citizens. So less than communicating to Nigerians at home about what's happening to our compatriots in that country, and also less communicative with the Nigerians in that country about what the general outlook is and what they should do. There oftentimes is simply not enough of a communication and outreach to get them the help they need. Now, to be fair, in fairness and balance, if you ask the foreign ministry and people who work in the foreign ministry, they will say, well, part of that is just simply because they're overstretched. I mean, we also saw very recently that many of our embassies were downgraded. We even closed down some embassies and high commissions, where basically we said we can't afford to run embassies in this many countries, so let us consolidate and then have an embassy in one country coordinate efforts across all its neighbors, which isn't the best. But I think also generally there's also a cultural issue of an orientation issue where our embassy staff need, and our foreign service staff in general, just simply need to be oriented with the fact that they are there to serve the people and not the other way around.
All right, we'll take a break, Lagos. When we come back from this break, we'll move on to our second story that takes us to the United States now, where Fox News has or will pay over $700 million for carrying fake news about the 2020 U.S. election. That story is coming up. I'm Sandra Ezekwesili. You're listening to Hard Facts on 99.3 Nigeria Info. This is Big 3 Global Edition. Don't go away. where the crisis at least 330 lives, with at least 3,200 injured. And we found out that we have at least 1,262 Nigerian students in Sudan, and they've appealed to the federal government to evacuate them as the crisis in Sudan intensifies. Our first story took a look at why the crisis is ongoing, what it's going to mean for neighboring countries, and what should be happening for the Nigerian students who are there at the moment. Now, let me take you to the US, where Fox News has admitted that it spread fake news about the 2020 US election being stolen. Dominion, a company that makes voting machines, sued Fox for repeatedly reporting that those machines were used to rig. They asked for $1.6 billion made of false, and also agreed to over $700 million. Let's listen to the CEO of Dominion speaking about this issue on the record.
Fox and Dominion have reached an historic settlement. Fox has admitted to telling lies about Dominion that caused enormous damage to my company, our employees, and the customers that we serve. Nothing can ever make up for that. Throughout this process, we have sought accountability and believe the evidence brought to light through this case underscores the consequences of spreading lies.
Over 2 years ago, a torrent of lies swept Dominion and election officials across America into an alternative universe of conspiracy theories, causing grievous harm to Dominion and the country. Today's settlement of $787,500,000 represents vindication and accountability. Lies have consequences.
Fox and Dominion.
You just heard from the CEO Dominion Voting Systems, John Paulos. Chief, how did Fox News go from making all these very strong allegations against Dominion to paying them almost $1 billion and acknowledging that the statements were false?
See, Sandra, court will humble you. court will humble you.
Well, court elsewhere.
Yes, court in a functional area will humble you, because what happened is, you know that the trial itself hadn't even started.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were they got into they gone to finish the phase that's called discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Discovery is where each side brings their evidence to prove their case, and then now allowing each one to look at the other person's evidence, right? And in Dominion's evidence, Dominion had memos from inside Fox News. They had emails from inside Fox News, messages between Fox leadership and senior management execs and on-air people like Tucker Carlson and all the rest. And in those messages, it was evident, it was clear that, because you have the Fox people saying, we know this is not true. Mm-hmm. We know that the facts are against this, but it doesn't matter. Let's talk like that. Mm-hmm. It's like the smokiest of smoking guns. Mm-hmm. So not only because, with defamation, because it's a defamation suit, defamation, you have to prove two things. You have to prove that the thing that I said is false, is a lie, and you have to prove that I knew it was a lie, or I should have reasonably seen it to be a lie, or I did not do enough basic due diligence that would have shown me that it's a lie. Like that, you need to prove those two things. And in the discovery, they had the messages and the internal documents from Fox News showing that Fox News knew it was a lie before it ever first went on air with them, and knew even after the first airings, and said, keep saying it. So once that became clear, Dominion, immediately after discovery, Dominion now asked for a summary judgment. And the summary judgment from the judge was that, look, obviously from the evidence that has been filed, this thing was obviously a lie. It is obvious that they did not rig the election, because Dominion also brought their own data and they had evidence that Fox News saw that data and knew that data was legit. So now the judge now said, okay, let the trial start. Now in the trial, we're no longer trying to answer question 1 of whether or not it is true. It is clear that it is false. Now let us ask the question in the trial: did Fox know that it was false when they were saying it? And like I said, the memo, the evidence was already there that Fox knew and said it anyway. So at that point, Fox was like, look, what's the way forward? How do we resolve this thing? And Dominion, named their price, almost $800 million. And Fox signed the check and came out to publicly acknowledge that yes, the court has ruled, so yes, it's true. The only concession Fox got was, of course, okay, they didn't pay the full 1.6 billion, and also they didn't have to apologize. They just simply acknowledged that it was false without apologizing for saying it. But if you don't give me 780 million,
you give me $800 million, that's as good as giving me $1 billion. And I think
you can even insult me.
I'll say thank you, sir. Give me the money. I think the most amazing evidence that came out in Discovery was all the messages between Fox News execs and their presenters, showing that they knew that the claims were false. Is this a situation where Fox simply did not think that Dominion would go this far, which would be ridiculous because it's America? Everybody's suing everybody and their mama for everything.
Yeah, but I think it was interesting because I think Fox, I think they didn't really expect it to go this far. It's clear. And really, that's now it makes me want to ask the question, how often has this happened with Fox News before? And to embolden them to say, look, nobody has sued us in the past, nobody's going to sue us now. So I think there was a bit of that. Because honestly, with the amount of evidence that we now saw after doing Discovery, I am stunned that any reasonable organization would have gone as far as they went, knowing what they knew and knowing how vulnerable they would be in a lawsuit. The only explanation is that they just simply expect people to sue because maybe they're used to doing it and nobody sued them.
It's very interesting that the U.S. government itself did not go after Fox News for spreading fake news about the elections. Why do you think that was?
So I think first and foremost, I was about to say the U.S. isn't a banana republic, but I think they are a bit of a banana republic. I think they just have less banana in their republic than most. So, so let me put it this way: they are not yet banana enough for government to step in and do this. Because in every civilized corner of the world, it's not normal for government to step in and shut down a media house or a news outlet because a fake story was carried. In normal places, what happens is the person who was aggrieved has the ability to go to court and sue. And everybody is, generally afraid of being sued. So it keeps everybody, as honest as possible. And if you like, you go off the reservation, well, you get hit with 780-something million. So because of that, there isn't that thing of, government must take action. How can they be talking like this? No, the system works. You carry the person who is aggrieved, carry them to court. If this fake news was being done, even the government has the right to have sued Fox News. But the government wouldn't even be willing, Joe Biden wouldn't be willing to take Fox News to court because he wouldn't want to give the appearance that he's using the apparatus of the state to fight against a private entity. Because in countries that function normally, the government is afraid and ashamed to be fighting the press, ashamed to be seen as trying to silence the press in any way. And so the government would much rather let a fake story stand and let those who are affected by the fake story use the civil legal system to sue the media house than to step in and start saying, we will fine you, we will shut you down, we will take your license, we have a code that fights this. That's not how it's done in civilized places.
Lagos, I want to hear your thoughts on this story. 0700-993-993 993 01465 But before I come to you, Lagos, and it's a question I want you to answer for me as well, Lagos. Chief, does this case prove the point that I always make on this show, that you don't need government to shut media houses down to fight fake news, and you don't need all these powers? You just need people to sue.
So, Sandra, just you start to tap yourself on the back. I think, well, I think it's well deserved, because this is the point that I always hear you make, and it's a point that a lot of people fight you on. But that's because we're used to the Nigerian way of doing things, and the Nigerian way is always government has to step in and punish someone. Government has to, we want more exports, government should ban imports. We want less this, government should come and regulate. That's our military upbringing. The military rule has sort of rewired our collective brain as a country to think that the first port of call should be government punishing someone. But it need not be. What government needs to do is put situations in place to make sure that, put processes in place that allows disputes like this to be settled reasonably and rationally. The press can be policed by the courts. It's just that simple, and it should be the same everywhere. And the government, that is the most powerful instrument in the country, should stay very far away from punishing the press, because the press is in many ways the most necessary tool that the people have to, one, keep themselves informed against government, and two, to also just generally hold society accountable.
Lagos 0700-993-993 057-190. Still to come. UK. Hello. Talk to me, Bram.
Fox News just opened themselves up to more lawsuits.
Okay.
Because the thing is, if you've done this before, that means that you've done it countless of times again and again, and you've probably got away with it. And I think that in the coming days or probably weeks, those who have been affected by a fake news from Fox News before, they could not prove it, could use this as a precedent to make a case in the court of law.
Okay. All right. Thank you for calling. On WhatsApp, this message says, unfortunately, lies don't have consequences here in Nigeria, relating to the court between Fox News and Domino's. We can't have a situation like that here in Nigeria. I disagree. We've got Sam Ken, John Oga, who says, Sandra, lies have consequences. That's definitely in the US. In Nigeria, we have a cabinet minister who lied to Nigerians for 8 years without consequences. We are just inexplicably tolerant of the absurd. Sam Ken, thanks for your message. We've got Alaba Lakbe, who says, may Almighty Allah restore peace to Sudan, because the innocent people are the ones suffering the wrath created by the leaders. Sandra, please let me use this medium to greet my fellow Muslim brothers and sisters for the successful completion of the Ramadan fast. I pray Almighty Allah accepts all our worship that we had and grant us all our supplications before Him. Sandra, why is it that much attention isn't given to what is going on in Sudan by African leaders and some other European leaders? We saw how they gave their serious attention and support for Ukraine and the Russia war. Why not do the same tonight to Sudan, for God's sake? That's an interesting question. However, I have seen a few African leaders speak on it. I don't know if I have data to show that they were more focused on the Ukraine versus Russia war than they have been on the Sudan war. But I do have a guest on the show who may be able to shed light on that. Chief?
Yeah, that's simply not accurate. Like you rightly pointed out, African leaders have been talking about the Sudan crisis. African leaders are already expressing, you've had at least 3 or 4 heads of state who have expressed willingness to come to Sudan to hold talks between Hemeti and Al-Burhan, or to bring them out of Sudan to have talks with them. At least 4 have stepped up there. I mean, you didn't see African leaders doing that for Russia and Ukraine. That's one. And then 2, let's bear in mind that there's a difference between one country invading another and one country having an internal dispute. There tends to generally be less willingness to step in and talk about an internal dispute in a country. Then there's also the other area. So that's on the side in support of the African leaders. But now let me switch sides and also oppose emotion and point out that African leaders tend to not want to stand up when there's injustice going on in another African country, because they tend to want other people to also keep their noses out when they're doing their own injustice at home. So African leaders will turn a blind eye to oppressions and crackdowns. They will turn a blind eye to coups. They will turn a blind eye to rigged elections, because at the end of the day, they want to be able to do all those things themselves.
All right, let's move on to our final story now. The UK Deputy Prime Minister just resigned over accusations he bullied people. That's our third story. The UK government published a report into Dominic Raab's time as a cabinet minister. The report found that Raab bullied ministry staff in a meeting. He's accused of banging his hand on the table, sticking his hand in people's faces, and speaking in a loud and threatening manner. He's also accused of constantly interrupting and berating his subordinates. The report accuses him of, quote, an abuse or misuse of power in a way that undermines or humiliates, and says his style had a, quote, unwarranted punitive element, end quote. Lagos, are you hearing what I'm saying to you? The Deputy Prime Minister of the UK, so their own, am I correct to say Yemi Osinbajo? Would I be correct if I say that this is sort of kind of like their own Yemi Osinbajo?
Well, it would be a mix of Osinbajo and Obi Omo-Agege.
I don't think Rest would view these examples as bullying or as enough to make a Deputy Prime Minister resign. Chief, are the Brits overreacting, or are we just too primitive over here? Are we just too used to bad behavior?
So many people, even though I feel there's a bit of an overreaction, I definitely believe that what he did counts as bullying. And if a country decides that that's enough to force a resignation on a deputy prime minister or even a prime minister, good. Because I think I noticed what you said there. If you could read that portion again, but there was a part about humiliation, about humiliating
yes,
staff,
they say that the abuse accuses him of, quote, an abuse or misuse of power in a way that undermines or humiliates.
Undermines or humiliates. See, that's one thing that in our culture, in our society undervalues dignity. And it's only a society where basic human dignity is considered non-negotiable that they will say humiliating a subordinate is grounds to resign. You shouldn't humiliate your subordinates. Your subordinates should not feel less than human in your presence. You should not be degraded for not doing the job to your satisfaction. But but humiliating and degrading subordinates is just part and parcel of what we call Nigerian culture. You see it from the classroom, kindergarten, primary school. Teachers are humiliating students. You see it in the workplace. Like you hear the horror stories from banks and the kind of things that managers do to subordinates while meeting targets. It's just a normal part of our life. You see it, even in our politics, which is why, it's expected that somebody will be running after someone and crying out, the whole idea is that if you have any authority, whether it's political, religious, familial, societal, any authority you have over people, you are well within your rights to humiliate them. And you can't have a healthy society built on that. And I think that's what, these people who have, solved most of their lives' problems are able to look at that squarely and say, you know what, no. But at the same time, I think it is that even before they solved those problems, there was already in their societies and in their cultures a realization that fundamentally there should be human dignity. And so anytime that human dignity is being infringed upon, those people have a right to stand up and say no. But we are still learning that. We're still learning that. There are lots of ways. Like I don't work for a Nigerian organization, we are a very efficient organization, very successful. Nobody has ever had the need to raise their voice. Nobody has ever had the need to insult a subordinate. Very different from other Nigerian companies in my sector a lot of the time, where people are, horrible bosses is a thing. Why? That is a cultural difference that we need to address.
So it's almost like there's a baseline for what is acceptable treatment that qualifies as dignified or that upholds a person's dignity regardless of their status, regardless of their class. However, under Boris Johnson, Priti Patel was also found to have bullied subordinates, but nothing happened. Why is the Rishi Sunak government less tolerant of bullying?
Well, I think Boris Johnson in many ways was an outlier. Boris Johnson pretty much ignored, dismissed, and showed scorn for almost every standard of behavior that the British said that they hold dear. He violated norms like he was getting medals for it. I mean, he lied to Parliament, all kinds of things that normally would lead to resignation by the Prime Minister himself. Johnson just shrugged them off. And it was the same thing all the way down. I don't think Rishi Sunak just has that same makeup to do that. Also, Rishi Sunak, for other very obvious reasons, can't take all the liberties that Boris Johnson can take. At the end of the day, even though a Rishi Sunak can rise to the highest political office without being called a non-indigene, there are still things that he will try to do or not do that he would get hit on the knuckles much faster than an indigene would. There is still xenophobia everywhere. So I think he also has to control that. But to your point, the point you made earlier on about that baseline of of human behavior and human decency, I think it's really something that we struggle with here. I remember something that happened when I was a very young child, and it stuck in my head, very formative. A friend of my mother's came to visit her and was complaining. She's a teacher and complaining about the headmistress and how the headmistress was insulting them and talking to them. And she said she talked to me in a way that I wouldn't even talk to my house girl like that. And I was like 7 or 8 years old. And what just popped in my head as she said that is that, but why would you talk to your house girl in a way that is worse than you would talk to anybody else? So even in that moment that she was receiving like brutal, like degrading behavior, which she saw was bad, she was still in her mind feeling that there was some person
who deserved that.
Yes.
All right, let's take a look at messages on WhatsApp now before I have to take a break. This message here says, I believe... Oh, no, hold on. Sandra, what happened with Fox News is a good one. I wish it can be replicated here in Nigeria. I always say consistent mass appeals and litigation of our government and powers to court is a very loud and effective way of protest and holding government to account. For those who say that it doesn't work in Nigeria, I have one question. Have you sued? If no, then do it first. Stop wailing the failure of what you haven't tried. Bawo from Ikorodu with that message. We'll take a very short break. When we come back from this very, 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 very short break, Lagos, we will take more of your messages from WhatsApp. I'm Sandra Ezekwesili. This is the Big 3 Global Edition on Hard Facts. Don't go away.
We should be patient and pray to God.